as either too much or too little, this does not enlighten me upon the intrinsic and essential value of the man who comes with the probable intention of bringing wisdom to me. To whom do I speak? Who are you? The bishop hung his head and replied, Vermis sum, I am a worm. A worm of the earth in a carriage, growled the conventionary. It was the conventionary's turn to be arrogant, and the bishop's to be humble. The bishop resumed mildly.
So be it, sir. But explain to me how my carriage, which is a few paces off behind the trees yonder, how my good table and the moorhens which I eat on Friday, how my 25,000 francs income, how my palace and my lackeys prove that clemency is not a duty, and that 93 was not inexorable. The conventionary passed his hand across his brow, as though to sweep away a cloud. Before replying to you, he said, I beseech you to pardon me. I have just committed a wrong, sir. You are at my house, you are my guest, I owe you courtesy. You discuss my ideas, and it becomes me to confine myself to combating your arguments. Your riches and your pleasures are advantages which I hold over you in the debate, but good taste dictates that I shall not make use of them. I promise you to make no use of them in the future.
I thank you, said the bishop. G. resumed. Let us return to the explanation which you have asked of me. Where were we? What were you saying to me? That 93 was inexorable? Inexorable, yes, said the bishop. What think you of Marat clapping his hands at the guillotine? What think you of Bossuet chanting the Te Deum over the dragonnades?
The retort was a harsh one, but it attained its mark with the directness of a point of steel. The bishop quivered under it, no reply occurred to him, but he was offended by this mode of alluding to Bossuet. The best of minds will have their fetishes, and they sometimes feel vaguely wounded by the want of respect of logic. The conventionary began to pant, the asthma of the agony which is mingled with the last breaths interrupted his voice, still, there was a perfect lucidity of soul in his eyes. He went on.
Let me say a few words more in this and that direction, I am willing. Apart from the revolution, which, taken as a whole, is an immense human affirmation, 93 is, alas, a rejoinder. You think it inexorable, sir, but what of the whole monarchy, sir? Carrier is a bandit, but what name do you give to Montrevel? Fouquier-Tainville is a rascal, but what is your opinion as to Lemoyne-Baville? Maillard is terrible, but Saux-Stevens, if you please? Duchesne Senior is ferocious, but what epithet will you allow me for the elder Letellier? Jordan Coupetet is a monster, but not so great a one as the Marquis de Louvois. Sir, I am sorry for Marie Antoinette, Archduchess and Queen, but I am also sorry for that poor Huguenot woman, who, in 1685, under Louis the Great, sir, while with a nursing infant, was bound, naked to the waist, to a stake, and the child kept at a distance, her breast swelled with milk and her heart with anguish. The little one, hungry and pale, beheld that breast and cried and agonized. The executioner said to the woman, a mother and a nurse, abjure, giving her her choice between the death of her infant and the death of her conscience. What say you to that torture of Tantalus as applied to a mother? Bear this well in mind, sir, the French Revolution had its reasons for existence, its wrath will be absolved by the future, its result is the world made better. From its most terrible blows there comes forth a caress for the human race. I abridge, I stop, I have too much the advantage, moreover, I am dying.
And ceasing to gaze at the bishop, the conventionary concluded his thoughts in these tranquil words. Yes, the brutalities of progress are called revolutions. When they are over, this fact is recognized, that the human race has been treated harshly, but that it has progressed. The conventionary doubted not that he had successively conquered all the inmost entrenchments of the bishop. One remained, however, and from this entrenchment, the last resource of Monseigneur Bienvenu's resistance, came forth this reply, wherein appeared nearly all the harshness of the beginning. Progress should believe in God. Good cannot have an impious servitor. He who is an atheist is but a bad leader for the human race.
The former representative of the people made no reply. He was seized with a fit of trembling. He looked towards heaven, and in his glance a tear gathered slowly. When the eyelid was full, the tear trickled down his livid cheek, and he said, almost in a stammer, quite low, and to himself, while his eyes were plunged in the depths. O thou! O ideal! Thou alone existest. The bishop experienced an indescribable shock. After a pause, the old man raised a finger heavenward and said,
The infinite is. He is there. If the infinite had no person, person would be without limit, it would not be infinite, in other words, it would not exist. There is, then, an I. That I of the infinite is God. The dying man had pronounced these last words in a loud voice, and with the shiver of ecstasy, as though he beheld someone. When he had spoken, his eyes closed. The effort had exhausted him. It was evident that he had just lived through in a moment the few hours which had been left to him. That which he had said brought him nearer to him who is in death. The supreme moment was approaching. The bishop understood this. Time pressed. It was as a priest that he had come. From extreme coldness he had passed by degrees to extreme emotion. He gazed at those closed eyes, he took that wrinkled, aged, and ice-cold hand in his, and bent over the dying man.
This hour is the hour of God. Do you not think that it would be regrettable if we had met in vain? The conventionary opened his eyes again. A gravity mingled with gloom was imprinted on his countenance. Bishop, said he, with a slowness which probably arose more from his dignity of soul than from the failing of his strength, I have passed my life in meditation, study, and contemplation. I was 60 years of age when my country called me and commanded me to concern myself with its affairs. I obeyed. Abuses existed, I combated them, tyrannies existed, I destroyed them, rights and principles existed, I proclaimed and confessed them. Our territory was invaded, I defended it, France was menaced, I offered my breast. I was not rich, I am poor. I have been one of the masters of the state, the vaults of the treasury were encumbered with specie to such a degree that we were forced to shore up the walls, which were on the point of bursting beneath the weight of gold and silver. I dined in Dead Tree Street, at 22 sous. I have succored the oppressed, I have comforted the suffering. I tore the cloth from the altar, it is true, but it was to bind up the wounds of my country. I have always upheld the march forward of the human race, forward towards the light, and I have sometimes resisted progress, without pity. I have, when the occasion offered, protected my own adversaries, men of your profession. And there is at Peteghem, in Flanders, at the very spot where the Merovingian kings had their summer palace, a convent of Urbanists, the Abbey of Sainte Claire in Beaulieu, which I saved in 1793. I have done my duty according to my powers, and all the good that I was able. After which, I was hunted down, pursued, persecuted, blackened, jeered at, scorned, cursed, proscribed. For many years past, I with my white hair have been conscious that many people think they have the right to despise me. To the poor ignorant masses, I present the visage of one damned. And I accept this isolation of hatred, without hating anyone myself. Now I am 86 years old, I am on the point of death. What is it that you have come to ask of me?
Your blessing, said the bishop. And he knelt down. When the bishop raised his head again, the face of the conventionary had become august. He had just expired. The bishop returned home, deeply absorbed in thoughts which cannot be known to us. He passed the whole night in prayer. On the following morning some bold and curious persons attempted to speak to him about member of the convention G. He contented himself with pointing heavenward. From that moment he redoubled his tenderness and brotherly feeling towards all children and sufferers. Any allusion to that old wretch of a G. caused him to fall into a singular preoccupation. No one could say that the passage of that soul before his, and the reflection of that grand conscience upon his, did not count for something in his approach to perfection.
This pastoral visit naturally furnished an occasion for a murmur of comment in all the little local coteries. Was the bedside of such a dying man as that the proper place for a bishop? There was evidently no conversion to be expected. All those revolutionists are backsliders. Then why go there? What was there to be seen there? He must have been very curious indeed to see a soul carried off by the devil. One day a dowager of the impertinent variety who thinks herself spiritual, addressed this sally to him, Monseigneur, people are inquiring when your greatness will receive the red cap. Oh! Oh! That's a coarse color, replied the bishop. It is lucky that those who despise it in a cap revere it in a hat.